This whole idea of pack your bags, I don't know about you, but I've really been enjoying the series and kind of excited because we've been tackling this idea that we're all kind of facing transitions in our life. At one point or another, we all kind of move into a transition. Some of these transitions we see, some of these transitions we don't see. Sometimes they're good transitions, like, having a baby or getting married or moving to a new job, starting a new career. And sometimes these transitions are difficult. Things like our family member got some horrible news that they got some kind of awful disease. Maybe we lost a family member. Maybe a relationship that we love is moving on, is falling apart. And we're really not sure how life kind of moves on after this. But as we've kind of had this discussion, what we realize is we're all either in a transition or kind of moving towards a transition. We could see it on the horizon. Maybe we don't see it, but we get that feeling something's coming. Regardless of that, whether it's seen or unseen, whether it's good or it's bad, whatever that transition might be, that there are things we can do even right now to prepare for what's coming ahead. As a matter of fact, that's been our tag for this series. Pack your bags. This whole idea of packing your bags is how to prepare for what's coming next. How do we prepare for what's coming next? How do we prepare for this next transition and this next season? We've had some really good talks along the way. This week, I kind of want to shift our focus a little bit into this idea of kind of maybe not knowing what's ahead and maybe not feeling like we're prepared for what's ahead. We have this idea that something's coming, but we're not sure what it is, and how do we get prepared for something maybe that we don't see, maybe that we're not even really prepared for. Maybe it's something that's good, maybe it's something that it's bad. Regardless of that, we're really not sure how to get prepared for it. Whether it's known or unknown, whether it's good or it's bad, we're really not sure what to do. Maybe we've recently lost a job. Maybe we're starting a new job. Maybe our kids are moving out. They're starting school or they're going to college, and that might be an exciting thing for you as a young person going to college, but for your parents who are facing their child moving out and kind of leaving them alone, maybe creating an empty nest, that poses some challenges, maybe even some problems. Maybe there's a financial issue in your life, and you're taking a step back, and things are going to be a little tight, and when it's a little tight financially, that kind of is deeply emotional to us, and when things are deeply emotional, we tend to react a little irrationally and a little uncomfortably. Maybe you're headed into that season. But whatever these things are, the truth is that there's a way we can prepare for it, even though we may not know what that season is or what that season's about to bring for us. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about this morning. What I find really interesting is sometimes we have this idea of when we get to this next thing, maybe when we get to this next transition, that it's going to be good, and then we get into it and it's not as good as we thought. Have you ever felt that way? I do a lot of pre-marriage counseling, and believe it or not, I do a lot of marriage counseling, probably more marriage counseling, because people step into marriage thinking, this is going to be so awesome and it's going to be so fun. And then after the first year of being married, they realize it's a lot harder than I thought it was. There's more challenges. This is a person, and even though I thought they're perfect, they're not perfect. And they smell in the morning, and they snore at night, and it's uncomfortable. They spend money differently than I do. They like different food than I do. This is a little uncomfortable for me. So something we thought that was good, we kind of step into it and realize it's not as good as we thought it was. I see this a lot happening when people go on vacations. We'll book a cruise, and we hope it's beautiful and it's awesome, and then we get on the cruise, and, the ship breaks down in the middle of the ocean, and you're dealing with smelly water and no food and upset people. Or maybe you book a resort. Maybe you've had this happen. You see the pictures online, and it looks beautiful, and you book your resort, and you get there, and then you kind of wonder what kind of lens they were taking pictures with, because this room that looked like it's a sprawling, massive bedroom, you get in, and it's 6 foot by 6 foot, big enough for a double bed. It's how did they do this, right? I saw the pictures, but it didn't kind of line up. Or maybe you spend like a lot of money booking a trip to the Bahamas, right? And you're promised that this weekend is going to be luxurious and exciting, and it's going to be a weekend around music, and all these artists are going to be there, and it's going to revolutionize your life, and there's going to be this luxury food and these luxury like sleeping quarters. It's just going to be the best weekend of your life. Why you'd put your hands in the life of Ja Rule completely is besides the point. I don't understand. But you get down there and you realize when you get there that it's not all this was meant to be, right? And like I was promised luxurious 5-star food, and it's a slice of white bread with a slice of like Kraft Single and then a slice of white bread. This isn't luxurious 5-star food. What happened? This is not my expectation. And if you know what I'm talking about, this happened about a year ago. A bunch of people went to this festival called the Fire Festival, not the F-I-R-E festival, the F-Y-R-E festival. They spent thousands and thousands of dollars booking a trip to the Bahamas, promised this luxurious life with these incredible artists and music that would change their life forever. And they get there, and there's literally nothing. They step into a compound. They're literally given cheese sandwiches of Kraft Singles and white bread with no sleeping quarters, not knowing what to do. Something happened with their expectations moving into it and like what they were expecting and what they ended up with as the result. And what we see nowadays, we don't really see that happen too much now because there's all this incredible way to get this information, isn't there? And the information craze with the internet and all the things that are out there. We have, like when you travel, there's travel apps now, right? There's the TripAdvisor and there's Yelp. My wife and I, we never go to a new restaurant before we check check the reviews on Yelp. And you'll get there, and these reviews are so incredibly specific. You'll see things like, hey, go to this restaurant, get this burrito. It's absolutely phenomenal, but ask for no tomatoes because they tend to put too much on. So you follow the advice, you go to the restaurant, you order the burrito, you eat the burrito, you ask them for, no tomatoes because that's what the review said. And they're absolutely right. It's absolutely phenomenal, and you just have to get it with no tomatoes because it was too many tomatoes. I mean, they're just incredibly specific information and specific resources. It happens that way with a lot of things. There's now Google reviews. You can go on a trip to a resort and read what somebody just came back from, what somebody just experienced. Hey, I went there. It was awesome. The resort was beautiful. The stay was great. Customer service was phenomenal. But don't get room 212 because the sink's broken. So I'm going to go. I'm going to enjoy this resort. But whatever you do, don't give me room 212. The information is incredibly specific, and it helps us kind of navigate some pitfalls. It helps us navigate maybe a bad experience or a bad vacation or a horrible meal that's going to make you sick. There is incredibly specific information that's available to us in the middle of our transitions, maybe before we step into this transition, but as we try to navigate these waters, whatever is before us, there is information available to us to help us be more successful. The problem for most of us is we never stop to ask. We never stop to ask, hey, is there a way I could do this better? Is there something I can do to prepare myself to maybe avoid the pitfalls? You see what's before me. I'm not sure what it is, but I have a feeling there might be some challenges. What can I do to better prepare for what is before me? You see, for all of us, this is a true statement. Seeing what's coming next doesn't ensure success in the next season. We might see what's coming. We might know what we're about to step into, but just because we know what we're stepping into doesn't mean we're going to be successful. Another way to say it is like this. Seeing what's coming next doesn't ensure knowing what the next season will require. We might step into something. We might know our child's going to move off to college, but we're not sure how to prepare for that. We might know we're about to lose a relationship, but we're really not sure what that's going to mean to my whole life. We might know that there's a next thing coming. We might even be able to see what that next thing is. But just because we can see it doesn't mean we're prepared for it. It doesn't mean we have what we need to be successful in this next transition, whatever that next step might be. It might be moving. It might be starting a new job. Or maybe it's worse. Maybe you lost a job. Maybe you moved to a new city and you're not happy about moving to a new city. Maybe you were forced to move here and you're uncomfortable with it and you don't know people. Whatever that transition might be for you, there is a way to be prepared. But for all of us, we might see what's coming. But for most of us, we haven't prepared for what's coming. See, the truth is, there's not a whole lot of mystery about our lives. Like when we kind of put our lives together, they're very similar. And I know we're all unique. I know we're all like snowflakes. We're all individuals, and we're all, not ordinary. I went to kindergarten, and I got that little pin that said, I'm somebody, but instead of somebody, they had that little thumbprint. It said, I'm thumbuddy. You know what I'm talking about? I believe it. You're all somebody. You're all important. You're all unique. You're all individuals. But the truth is, there's not that much mystery of life left. That if we look at all of our stories comparatively, they're very similar. We all can kind of pull from similar experiences. We all kind of face similar transitions. And if we were to kind of face these transitions with the help of other people, maybe we would be more successful in the end. Maybe these transitions would be a little easier to get through. Maybe at the end of it, we would be a little bit happier. See, because the truth is, somebody else has already experienced what you're about to experience. And somebody else already knows what you don't know. Whatever that transition is, whatever it might be that you're stepping into, somebody else has already been there. Somebody else already knows what you don't know and has the ability to share that wisdom, that advice, that counsel with you. But for us, more often than not, we don't look for it. More often than not, we kind of think we're okay without it. We can kind of do this on our own. Right? We see this a lot. We see it a lot with people as they step into marriage. We see it a lot with people as they have new children. Well, I'm good. I've seen kids before. I'm a brother. I've had kids. I've seen kids. I know what they look like. I know what they smell like, but I'm not prepared. I know what marriage looks like. My parents were married, but I'm not prepared. I know what this financial transition might mean, but I'm not prepared. We might know what's ahead, but have done very little to prepare for what that next season, what that next transition might mean for us. So last week we talked about packing our bags, and I showed you a bag that was packed for our trip, right? This is a nice leather bag. Actually, it really smells like really strong leather. My wife made me keep it out of the house because it smelled so bad. But this is a bag that's kind of, you can imagine it's kind of worn. It's seen some days, like some traveling experiences. And when you travel, what are the things that we want to bring with us as we travel? We talked about that a little last week. We talked about bringing, we have some toothpaste because indefinitely, somehow, when you travel, your breath tends to always smell worse. So you bring some toothpaste, you bring some mouthwash with you. What are other things we bring when we travel? We talked about bringing some Airborne with us, right? That Airborne will help defend our immune system, and Airborne's given us a bunch of money to make sure everyone sees that, so we're going to leave that on there for you. What are other things we bring when we travel? How about this? This is a little bit old school for us, but you guys remember this? If you're under 30, you're going to have no idea what this is. This is actually a map of the entire United States. It's actually printed. This is the map system in paper form. And I know some of you are like, I've never, ever seen something like this before. The truth is, some of you still print your directions out on MapQuest. That totally blows my mind. But you need a map, right? You need to know where you are. You need to know where you're going. Some people, we do analog. We do maps. Other people, we have smartphones. What are other things we bring when we travel on a trip with us? How about this? We bring cell phone chargers, don't we? We bring a charger because we don't want to be caught with a dead phone. I don't know if you spend any time with like high school students, like 16-year-olds, but what amazes me about a 16-year-old, their mind isn't fully developed yet, so sometimes they tend to make irrational decisions. They tend to not make the best decisions for them. Sometimes it feels like their life's completely spinning out of control, but they always have a cell phone charger with them. They're always prepared because, God forbid, even if their life is spinning out of control, they need to be able to snap it. They need to be able to share that with somebody else. They always have a cell phone charger. Sometimes we need to bring a cell phone charger with us. But what good is a cell phone charger without our cell phone, right? Like, we need to bring a phone with us, don't we? We need to be able to contact someone or call someone in the need of an emergency. We need to be able to take a picture of these great experiences. We want to be able to share whatever it is maybe we're sharing with us. When we travel, we got to have a phone with us. And do you guys remember that old game show that was on TV, the Millionaire Show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? You guys remember that show? Do you remember what would happen when they asked you a question and you didn't know what the answer was? What did they allow you to do? Phone a friend, right? They offered you a lifeline. You didn't know the answer. You could obviously phone a friend, call someone. But you had to make sure you called the right person, right? Because if you could call somebody who really wasn't that smart and didn't know their trivia, what good is the phone call? Or maybe that person was just sitting in front of the internet, and then in that case, that was a brilliant phone call. But we got to make sure we're contacting the right people in need of this situation. That's what I want to talk about a little today, is who are we going to call? That if we have a lifeline in the middle of our transitions, in the middle of our circumstances, who's the person we're going to call? Who do we need to call when it comes to that moment in our life, when we're facing these transitions, when we're facing these maybe difficult circumstances, difficult decisions? Who is it that we can call in the middle of that situation? What friend do we dial? Here's the question. Do we have the right people? Do we have the right friends on our speed dial? When it comes down to these challenging circumstances or situations or transitions, kind of preparing ourselves for what's next, maybe seeing what's next but not feeling prepared for it, do we have the right people on speed dial? Or maybe here's a better follow-up than even that. Are we willing to even listen? You might have the right people on speed dial, but you don't want to listen to what they say anyway. You call, you talk, you hang up, they don't get a word in. Are you even willing to listen to the people you have on speed dial, to the people maybe around your life that can speak into your circumstance, that can speak into your situation, that maybe can help you in this new season of life, whatever that transition might look like? Maybe they've been there before and they see the pitfalls. They know what's ahead of you. They can help you better prepare. Are you willing even to listen to what they have to say? See, for all of us, we deal with these kind of things all the time. Maybe you've fallen in love recently. And I don't know if you realize this about being in love, but sometimes when you fall in love, you tend to go a little crazy, right? That's just the nature of it. We tend to go a little crazy. We tend to make some pretty bad decisions, or maybe rush decisions, or see with like these love goggles, like these emotion goggles, and we don't think practically. If that's you and you've kind of fallen in love, you need somebody on speed dial that you can talk to, because chances are you're going to make a bad decision along the way because you're not thinking clearly. You're thinking with these love goggles on. Maybe it's dealing with family members, right? Family can be absolutely awesome and incredible. At the same time, it can be incredibly challenging, and it can stretch you, and it can be tough. Maybe you're dealing with family members, and you need somebody that you can call on speed dial that can help you speak to your family in a direct and loving way. Some of you are about to move into a new season of life. You're going to experience something that may be difficult. Maybe it's that financial decision. Maybe you've got to completely shift how you're spending your money. You're going to put yourself on a really tight budget because something came up. And when we do that, it hurts a little bit. It's uncomfortable. It's almost deeply emotional, and we feel the stress and the pain of it. And we know it's going to affect our family and our relationship with our spouse. How do we prepare for that? Maybe it's moving into a new house. Maybe it's moving into a new school. Our daughters, we just moved into a new neighborhood at the end of last year, so our daughters are starting a new school this year. And they're in the middle of this really awkward transition of going to a school that they like, but they don't know anyone, and they're not comfortable, and it's every day drop-off is a little bit uncertain. How do we navigate those kind of transitions? And are there people around us that can help us prepare for those things? So as we kind of face this idea of going into this transition, and is there a way that we can be better prepared? Is there advice maybe that can be given that can help us prepare for whatever might be next to avoid those pitfalls? I want to kind of look at a few things. We're going to look at a passage of Scripture. Before we do, I want to say this, and this really talks about the importance about what we're about to face. And that's this. I believe that for many of us, this is kind of a life and death decision of whether or not we're willing to pull people in on our experiences and on our transitions. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, like, isn't that a little extreme? Like, I've heard all this before. I know we need to have friends. I know we need to have advice. I know there needs to be people that share. But is that really, I mean, do you really mean that? Is it that extreme? And as I began to kind of think that through, like, do I really mean that, or am I just being, like, overly dramatic to make a point? The truth is, I really do believe that, and here's why. Because I believe that God has the best life in store for you. I believe that there's like this full life that is in store for each one of us. We say this all the time, that when you meet Jesus, Jesus makes your life better and makes you better at life. That there is this full life that each of us can live. But the truth is, we'll never get there if we try to do it on our own. We'll never get there if we think we can navigate all of these transitions and difficult circumstances by ourselves, because we were never created to do life alone. We were never created to walk through transitions and know what's ahead of us, to see the unseen and be able to navigate it by ourselves. And if we continue to live life that way, if we continue to think, hey, I got this, I can do it all, I don't need anyone else's help, the truth is, we'll always fall short of the full life that God has intended for us. And I want something better for you. I want the full life that God has promised you. I want Jesus to make your life better and make you better at life. And to do that, we need to do life together. We need to be willing to share. We need to be willing to bring people in to talk about our circumstances, or maybe talk even into our circumstances. I think the decision to do this holds so much potential for you that it has the ability to completely change the direction and the course of your life if you're willing to give it a shot. This morning, we're going to look at a passage of scripture written by this really famous ancient king. His name was Solomon. Solomon was the son of King David. We just spent a lot of time talking about King David. Solomon, when he was alive, he was considered the wisest man alive. And what I find completely incredible about Solomon, for being the wisest man alive, he talks so much about this idea, about bringing other people into your life. And you would think, if you're really the wisest man alive, that kind of in and of itself means you shouldn't have to ask other people. But Solomon, being the wisest man alive, kind of starts off by saying, here is how you get wisdom. Here's how you become the wisest man alive. Don't do it alone. Don't try to navigate life alone. Don't try to answer all of life's problems alone. You weren't meant to do it alone. And if you want to know the beginning of wisdom, do life together. Here's how he says it in Proverbs 11:14. For lack of guidance, a nation falls, but victory is won through many advisors. For lack of guidance, a nation falls. For the lack of advisors, for the lack of seeking help, what awaits you? Imminent destruction. But if you want to have a full life, if you want to have a victorious life, if you want everything that Jesus has in store for you, he says you need other people involved. You need many people involved. You need many advisors. This is the beginning. This is kind of the basis of wisdom. You can't do it alone. Now, I recognize that for some of you here today, you might feel like, your whole world isn't contingent on this. Or maybe you do. Maybe you feel like your whole world is contingent on this. I believe this is a huge part of your world. And maybe it's such a significant part of whatever that transition is that you're facing into. It has the ability to completely change the course of your life. Because some of these transitions are huge. Some of these transitions are not just dramatic. They are our world. They are like our life moving forward. And I believe this is huge for each of you. To decide if you're going to be a person that includes other people in, that brings in help, that brings in counselors and advisors, or are you going to try to do it alone? And so if that's you, and if that's true, and I don't think anybody would disagree with that. I don't think anyone here would kind of be belligerent and say, well, I don't need help. I can do it all on my own, right? You got to listen to your gut. We've heard that before. Just follow your gut. Do it by yourself. And there may be times in your life when you just need to follow your gut. But the truth is, that's not all the time. And that's not how God wants you to live. He's intended you to do this with others, to keep inviting people into your life, to keep inviting people in and ask the questions, how do I prepare for what's coming ahead? And so over the next few minutes, I just want to talk about a couple of big excuses. And I think these are big excuses for all of us, not just men or women, not just people who can see what's coming or can't see what's coming. But I think these are big excuses. And here's the question we're going to start with. What keeps us from asking others? What keeps us from asking others? We kind of know we should. We know it would be better if we did. But for a lot of us, we never ask, do we? I know it would be better. I know it would be helpful. I know I have friends. I know I have people that care. But I never ask the questions. What keeps you from asking? And one of the biggest excuses that I've found, and this might deal more with men in particular, but I think that this kind of covers all the sexes. One of the biggest excuses I found is this. We think we already know. Right, men, we do this a lot when we're driving places, right? It's the reason we don't stop and ask for directions. Why don't you stop and ask for your directions, your wife might ask? Because I know where I'm going. I know where I'm headed. I know the general direction. I may not know all the roads, but we're headed that way. And then you have a loving wife who lets you know that you're completely wrong and you don't know where you're going and you need to stop. But we feel that way a lot, even in our transitions, don't we? We feel like we know where we're going. I know what's ahead of me. I know my kid's going off to school. I know I'm about to lose this relationship. I know so-and-so that I love so much might die. I know I'm about to move. I know there's some financial hardship here. I know what's ahead of me. I'm good. We kind of say that to ourselves, don't we? We say it all the time. I'm good. I know what's ahead of me. Solomon has some really interesting words about people who feel that way. He says this in Proverbs 26. He says, do you see a person wise in their own eyes? Do you see somebody who kind of thinks they're good and thinks they know what they're doing? He says, there is more hope for a fool than for them. I mean, those are some serious words, aren't they? It's almost like halfway through, he kind of gets this like evil maniacal laugh. My daughter calls it my evil laugh when I do it. He's like, do you see a person who's wise in their own eyes? There is more hope for a fool. And I'm not calling you that. That's Solomon. He's saying if you think you know where you're going, if you think you're good and you don't need any help, if you are like almost that arrogant where you feel like you really need no help, he says there is more hope for a fool than for you. Because really, what's the basis of this? It's pride, isn't it? We're proud. We're a little bit arrogant. We feel we know. We know what's going on. We know what's in front of us, so I don't need to ask for help. Because if you ask for help, what does that mean you are? It means you're ignorant because you don't know. You don't have all the answers. You're not sure what's in front of you. Let me say this, in the words of Solomon, it's way better to be ignorant than it is to be arrogant. Because if you're arrogant and you think you can do it all on your own, Solomon says there is more hope for a fool than for you. Have you ever met somebody that's that wise? Maybe as I'm speaking this, it's a little introspection for you, right? Maybe you feel like it's you. I'm that person that never has to ask for help because I think I know where I'm going. Let me encourage you today. Don't be the fool who says, I got it all figured out. I know what's in front of me. Solomon says there is more help for a fool than there is for somebody who thinks they have it all answered, for somebody who thinks they know where they're going, for somebody who thinks they have everything figured out. That's arrogance, and that leads to a fall. I recently heard this really great story by Muhammad Ali. You remember Muhammad Ali? He's that really famous boxer, the world champ. Well, when he won his first title, he was on an airplane flying home. And on his trip home, he sits in the plane, and the stewardess, the woman comes by, and she says, hey, sir, I'm going to have to ask you to buckle up. And him and all his arrogance, I mean, it's Muhammad Ali. He makes this really famous quote. He says, Superman don't need no seatbelt. Superman don't need no seatbelt, he responds. And this woman, her retort back is so perfect and so cutting that it's been like chronicled for all of us to read about years and years later. She looks back at Muhammad Ali, the champ, and she goes, well, Superman don't need no plane, so buckle up. I mean, if you're that good that you don't need a seatbelt, then you don't need a plane. But you're here. You see, for most of us, we kind of go through our life that way. I'm good. I don't need a seatbelt. And the truth is, that's just our pride talking. What you need is a seatbelt. What you need is to buckle up. What you need is to ask. Don't be so wise. Don't be so proud. Don't be so prideful in your own eyes that you refuse to ask for help, because there is more hope for a fool than for you. Don't allow pride to blind you. Don't allow pride to keep you from asking the question, what's in front of me and how can I prepare for what's next? I think this is a brilliant statement that kind of captures the whole heart of today's message. This would be the bottom line. Knowing that you don't know is the first step to knowing what you don't know. Knowing that you don't know something is the first step to knowing what you don't know. It's the first step to knowing what's in front of you. It's the first step to knowing the pitfalls that you can avoid. It's the first step to knowing how to work this transition so that at the end of it, you're still successful. Knowing that you don't know something is kind of the beginning of wisdom, as Solomon would say. Be that person who's willing to say, I might not have all the answers. I might not know what's before me. I can see it coming, but I really don't know how to prepare for it. Knowing that you don't know is the first step to knowing what you don't know. And oftentimes, I always find this interesting. Oftentimes, the people that don't ask the questions, they really don't ask the questions for this reason, because they already feel they know what they're going to say. I don't want to ask you because I know what I'm going to say. Like, as humans, we have this intrinsic ability to make this really awful decision logically, right? We know it's a bad decision, but we talk ourselves into believing that it's a good decision. And now that we believe it's a good decision, no one's going to talk us out of it. I mean, we do this all the time. We know that's a bad investment. We know it's a bad idea to go there. We know it's a bad idea to go out on that date or call that person back or to move into this job or this new city. We know it's a bad idea, but we've convinced ourselves that it's a good idea. So I'm not going to ask anyone because I already know what they're going to tell me. If you're in that position where you feel like you already know what someone's about to tell you, that should be like an alarm for you. An alarm should go off. The minute you feel like you have all the answers and you don't need to ask somebody because whatever they're going to say, you feel like you already know, that should be a sign that you need to stop and you need to ask. The minute we feel like we have all the answers, the minute we feel like maybe we've got it all figured out and I don't need to ask anybody else because I know what they're going to say, an alarm should go off in your head, reminding you, you can't do this alone. You were never meant to do this alone. And that is the beginning of pride. Don't do it. Ask for help. The only area of your life that you feel like you've got it all figured out, the area of your life where you feel like you don't need anybody else's help, that should be the one area, the prime spot where you ask somebody to come in and speak into that circumstance or that situation. That's how you overcome this. We work together. We pull together. And we help each other. Together we're stronger. God, through many authors of the Bible, he refers to those who follow Jesus, the church, as a body. He says we're all a body, and we all make up one big body. There's a hand and an arm and a chest and a head and a leg and a foot and there's toes. And we all make it up together. And when the body gets hurt, if you hurt your leg, the hand doesn't look at the leg and say, oh, tough luck, hope you figure it out. He said the hand looks at the leg and says, no, your knee's hurt. Let's support your knee. Let's take care of it so we can continue to move forward. He says it's the same way with you and with people that all make up this body. When you're hurt, when you need help, when you need advice, when you're in the middle of a transition, when you're about to step into a transition and it's uncomfortable, he said you come together and you work together. The body is there to take care of itself, to work together. And here we do that through small groups. We do that through our small groups where we connect and we support and we bring each other together. We're about to start this new small group. And it's going to be an awesome season as we step into this. We're having a young adults group created. There's going to be a group for men, hopefully a group for women. There are places where you can connect and you can get to know people and you can be completely honest with people. And I would encourage you, if you're not in a group, join a group. Sign up to be in a group. Don't let another season go by where you're not in community with people, where you're not being honest with people, where you're willing to say, hey, here's what's going on in my life. What keeps you from asking others? Maybe you're just too afraid to be honest. What keeps you from asking someone else? Maybe you're just too afraid to kind of enter into that next step of groups and say, here's what's going on in my life. I've got to be honest. I'm a little bit uncomfortable. I've got to be honest. My marriage isn't all that it should be, and we're about to step into this new thing, and it's going to add a lot of pressure, and I'm not sure how my marriage is going to do. I've got to be honest. My kid's moving off to school, and I'm not sure how our relationship is, and it worries me a little bit. I've got to be honest. My finances aren't that great, and I have this thing coming up, and I'm not sure how to prepare for what's ahead of me. Are you just too afraid to be honest? See, back to that small group example. If you've been in a small group, we usually start groups off by sharing our stories, by getting to know the people in our groups. And undoubtedly, as we share these stories, as we get to know people, like somebody always kind of, when it's their story, and it's usually a few weeks in, maybe it's even a month in, they just kind of share their whole story. They don't share like the G-rated version. They like uncover everything. And everyone in the group is always a little surprised. Sometimes they're like really shocked, even a little horrified to hear all those level of details. But this person is just so willing. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to tell you how it is. I'm going to uncover every dark corner of my life. Here's my story. And at the end of every one of those groups, you almost get most of the group that kind of turns around and says, I didn't know we were sharing at that level. Can I share my whole story? Can I reshare? Because when we become that honest with each other, we're willing to invite people in to our life and to our story and to uncover that thing. Everybody wants to be a part of it. Everybody wants that level of honesty. Everybody wants that level of comfort and safety where you can know everything about me and I'm not worried. I'm not in fear of how you're going to react. I know you're here to help make me better and I'm here to help make you better. And together we can do this and we can overcome and we can prepare each other for what's next. There is this beautiful thing that happens when people are willing to be honest and they're willing to share exactly what's going on. What keeps you from asking? Is it because you know or you think you know? Is it because you're too afraid to be honest? What keeps you from asking? Solomon says, plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. Are you willing to pull people in? Are you willing to have people enter into whatever it is that you're dealing with, to share counsel and share wisdom that you could be completely honest with? What keeps you from asking? Maybe it's not that you feel like you have all the answers, you don't. Maybe it's not that you're too afraid to be honest because you're willing to be honest. Maybe it's something way more practical. Maybe you just don't know who to ask. Maybe you would say, Jim, I get all that, you're right. I know exactly the parts of my life where I need somebody to come in. I know exactly the parts of my life where it's uncomfortable. I know exactly the areas of my life where I need somebody to speak into it. But here's the problem. I just don't know who to ask. Right? This is where kind of co-workers come in. You'd say something like I see the people I work with, but they're nuts. I'm not going to ask them. They have nothing good to say. I see the people in my neighborhood, but none of them have kind of figured it out. I'm not willing to ask them because they don't have the answers. Or maybe you say, Jim, you just talked a lot about small groups. You should see the small group I'm in. They're nuts. I can't ask them. You see, I think the problem for most of us is maybe perhaps we're just looking for the wrong people. Who should you ask? For a lot of us, we want to think of like the wealthy people and the powerful people, the people in authority, the people with the most experience. But Solomon would say, that's not who I want you to look for. Here's who I want you to look for. He says, walk with the wise and you'll become wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm. Who do you look for? Who do you ask? The wise people. And I'm not saying that everyone in our church and everyone on our teams, they're all just, incredibly wise. If you're here and you're serving on a team, you are all incredibly wise. But the truth is, I've had too much experience serving with people, rubbing shoulders with people. I've had too much experience in small groups to know that one of the best ways for you to gain that kind of wisdom, one of the best ways for you to gain that kind of relationship where you can ask, is to begin to work with people and begin to get into groups with people. I've had incredibly wise small group leaders and small group members that have helped change the course and the direction of my life by sharing their wisdom into whatever that circumstance is that I'm dealing with. And the same can be true of you. You might be saying, I'm not sure who to ask. I'd say get into a group. Find the wise people and begin to ask. Begin to pull them in. What keeps you from asking? Is it that you think you have all the answers? I'm good. Or I know how they're going to respond and I don't want to hear that. Is it because you're afraid to be honest? Or is it because you don't know who to ask? You see, as we struggle through those answers, we're going to conclude, and I'm going to conclude with really just kind of preparing you for what's ahead of you. When we kind of consider people and bringing them into our situation, here are some things we need to consider. We need to choose someone who will ask the tough questions. Somebody who's not there to lecture you. You have those friends who whenever you talk about what's going on in your life, they just sit there and they talk to you and they lecture you about all the bad decisions you've made. Not someone like that. Somebody who's willing to ask the really difficult questions. I have a friend who lives in southern Maine. They've become, they're my closest friends, but they become like our marriage counselors. Every time we go down to visit, sure enough, every time something comes up about my marriage with Tanya. And maybe it's something we're dealing with, communication, or struggling to make a big decision. And these are the type of friends that you want. These are the type of friends that sit there and lecture you. They ask the questions that nobody else is willing to ask. They ask the questions that people are scared to ask. But because they ask those questions, it makes me a better husband. It makes me a better father. It makes me a better man. It prepares me for my relationships. It prepares me to lead better because I have somebody who's willing to ask the things that nobody else is willing to ask. And you know that person in your life. Maybe you are that person for other people. Maybe you've been the person that is too scared to answer the questions out of fear of what the reaction might be. But if you want to prepare yourself for what's next, you need to have somebody who's willing to ask the hard questions. Not only that, we need people that have nothing to lose by telling you the truth. That have nothing to lose. I heard this statement, I think it's absolutely brilliant. You need a friend that cares more about you as a friend than they do the friendship. You need a friend that cares more about the friend than the friendship. Somebody who's willing to say, I'm more concerned about you and where you're headed in life than I am about this relationship. I want what's best for you. And if that means telling you the truth, even though the truth is going to be hard to hear, I'm going to do it for you. I get nothing from it. There's no benefit that comes to me. I just want to see you successful. I want to see you reach the full life that God has for you. Here's what you need to know. You need a friend that's willing to ask the tough questions. You need a friend that's willing to tell you the truth. And then you need friends who are where you want to be in life. They have a marriage that you want to have. They have children that you want to have. How do you raise your kids that way? How do you love your husband or your wife that way? How did you become so successful in business but still have such a heart for your community? They're where you want to be in life. How can I get what you have? How can I make decisions that will lead me to have a full life and still be concerned about the things I'm concerned about? Who in your life is where you want to be? They're a friend you should ask. Who in your life is willing to tell you the truth, regardless of what it might do to your friendship? They're a friend you need to ask. And who in your life is willing to ask you the tough questions? So what keeps you from asking others? What keeps you from bringing people into your life? Is it that you think you already know? Is it that you think you know what they're going to respond with? You think you know their answer, so you're almost too afraid to ask? Is it that you're too afraid to be honest? Or maybe it's that you just don't know who to ask. I don't know the person. I don't know who's out there for me to ask. But I know that I need to. See, that's what you have to figure out this morning. You need to identify what keeps you from asking. What keeps you from bringing people into your life and into this transition and into this decision? And whatever that is, then you need to take the step beyond it. What keeps you from asking for advice will ultimately keep you from thriving in your life. That area that you're afraid to ask for advice on, that area that you're afraid to bring people in on, that'll constantly be the thing that keeps you from reaching the full life that God has intended for you. And you constantly avoid it. You constantly think you've got it. You're worried about what somebody will say when you bring it up and you're honest. That one area, that's the pitfall that will keep you where you are for years and years and years. And I've seen people struggle with that. My guess is you've seen people struggle with that. It's the one thing they just can't get by because it's the one thing they're always going to do alone. If you want to thrive in life, if you want to reach that full life that God has for you, you have to be willing to ask. You have to be willing to pull people into your life. To thrive in the next season, here's what you need to do. Here's a couple of questions you need to answer. What do you think you know? What area of your life do you think you know everything? What don't you want to hear? What are you constantly not asking people because you feel like you already have the answer? And what are you not being honest about? What are you afraid to have that conversation out of fear of what they might say or they might do or how they might look at you from that point on? And finally, who can you ask this week? Who in your life, as we've had this conversation this morning, who in your life has come to your head that you said, this is the person, this is what I need to ask, this is the question I need to ask, this is the conversation I need to have, I need to be honest, I don't know it all. Who is that person for you? You see, I'm guessing you discover this just as I have. It's really not a knowledge thing, is it? Right? I mean, there's plenty of knowledge. The truth is, whatever you're dealing with, there's already been a sermon preached, there's been a message prepared, a blog has been written, a podcast is available, a TED Talk is out there. There's already knowledge for you that gives you the answer. It's really not a knowledge thing, because if it was a knowledge thing, we'd all already be doing it. It's really a relationship thing. What you need is a relationship with somebody who's willing to hold you accountable, who's willing to have hard conversations, who's willing to ask. You see, it's not knowledge. It's the relationship that matters. How do you pack your bags? How do you prepare for what's next? You make sure the right people are on speed dial. And you make sure when they call or when you call, you're willing to be honest. That these people are willing to ask tough questions and tell the truth. Who's on your speed dial? What relationships do you have now that God might use to prepare you for what's next? Here's a better one for you. Who's in your small group? Are you in a small group? Because if you're not, maybe that's the next step for you. How do you prepare for what's next? By admitting now that I don't know everything. And then perhaps that's the beginning of knowing what you don't know. Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, I thank you, God, for this incredible kind of nuggets of wisdom from Solomon, God. From the wisest man alive who had all the answers, but realized that all of these answers come from knowing people, from being in a relationship with people, from pulling on the wisdom and the advice and the counsel of others. And I pray, God, that whatever situation we might find ourselves in, God, whatever thing we think we already have the answers to, or we're afraid to ask because we kind of know what their answer will be, God, whatever that transition is for us, I pray you would help us to overcome that fear, to be honest, to ask people, God, and to ask the right people, people that will be honest with us, that will tell us the truth, that will ask the difficult questions, that have nothing to gain but to see us successful. And I pray as you give us that wisdom, God, to begin to ask those questions, to begin to shine the area on our lives, God, that we've tried to keep hidden, that we've tried to keep our own, God, that nobody else can enter into. I pray as we begin to uncover that and share that with people, you would begin to lead us into that full life that you've promised us. God, because we believe with all our hearts that if we follow Jesus, he will make our lives better and he will make us better at life. I give you all glory and honor. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.